I actually had a very traumatic racial experience a few years ago when I was at this sleepover camp. But when I got there, the problem was there were these two kids who were bullying me. And one of the kids' name was Patrick. And Patrick, he would call me the N-word every single day. Every day from sun up till sundown, he'd call me the N-word, and I would tell him to stop. I'd tell him that it was derogatory. I'd give him a whole history lesson. He didn't care.
You're 16 or you're 15 and you shouldn't have to think about surviving, but you do.
When we go to some of the richer areas, that's when the systemic racism sort of hit me.
At the time, I guess I didn't realize that all the minorities were hanging out together.
I was called the N-word, by a classmate.
The age of, again, 14, 15, dealing with the police in a serious case.
There were definitely times where I felt out of place.
We were in that town, the 4 raisins in a tub of sweet vanilla ice cream.
Because I'm mixed race, I've had to learn about race a lot earlier in my life. And I've had to deal with a lot of incidents where because people didn't know what I was, they had slip-ups.
Being mixed, I think, can be a little bit difficult because you don't have a group to relate to. I think it can be very confusing for a young person to kind of identify when the two people that you're raised by, their races are telling you that you're not them.
I've used those experiences, and with this project, I'm able to share them in a film and be able to help people better understand what it's like for a black student. And I'm hoping that with that information and experiences that I've had, I can create a more understanding and inclusive environment in schools.
This is America. Don't catch you slipping now. Don't catch you slipping now.
A lot of times as a student, you walk into class and your experiences and the way that you're thinking and the way that you're approaching life is so much different than the way that your white friend is approaching life and your white friend is thinking about life because of these things that you see and the things that you know.
For some reason, I had a piece of paper in my hand that had Trayvon's image on it, and we show it to the waitress. She looks at the piece of paper, and she goes, wow, Trayvon, that's a nice name. And then she walks away. It didn't register, it didn't hit her at all. There was no sort of emotional tie to that. And that's virtually impossible for a black person who turned on the news, the radio, talked to their friends around that time to not be in some way affected by that. And she had no idea.
I believe that it really shows the divide between whites and blacks sometimes when you have these sorts of events that go on where something really horrific happens in the black community and somehow the white community just there isn't a response because they didn't know that it happened or they didn't hear about it and it wasn't as big of a deal. But as a black kid, that's something that you think about and it's something that is a big deal to you.
This is America. Don't catch you slipping now. Don't catch you slipping now. Look what I'm whipping now. This is America. Don't catch you slipping now. Don't catch you slipping now.
And when you don't know African Americans, often your only knowledge comes from what you hear in the media, off comments adults might say or what have you. So I think a lot of my childhood was just dealing with the ignorance about African Americans of my colleagues, my classmates, dealing with questions that were innocently asked, but often could be very hurtful.
People would say, oh, he can do this or he can do that because he's black, and they would discount maybe that I have some nice dance moves, like it's that hard to have rhythm.
It's definitely one of the worst microaggressions that I come around during my days. You're not black enough, or you talk white, or you're not really black. That insults me, and that relinquishes any respect that anyone could have to my points, and it diminishes and minimizes who I am.
If I had a dollar for every time somebody asked to touch my hair when I had hair, or to compare their tans to mine, or just lots of comments like that, which would just come at you all the time.
Moderation. Avoidance of excess or extremes, especially in one's behavior or political opinions.
To this day, I feel like I often have to hold back some of my true self. I think that in terms of my hair, I always straighten my hair. My hair is naturally curly. And I think I've been socialized into thinking that my hair is more professional this way because I often get comments if I wear it curly. So there are moments where I feel like I have to hold back my true self, or I wouldn't say the kind of things that I would normally say with my friends or family because I'm in a professional setting, or because I'm code switching a bit in the environment that I'm in.
Code switching. Shifts between different languages or ways of speaking in a different context. It's important that we all, especially teachers and administrators and other students that are white, they need to know that a black kid coming into that classroom is moderating himself or herself. And they're making sure that they are representing themselves the best that they can.
This is America. Don't catch you slipping now. Don't catch you slipping now.
In the black community, there's like the talk that happens and where your parents really have to sit you down, and it happens over the course of, you know, lots of different incidents over lots of years sometimes, and really just explain what it means to be, especially as a black man, what it means to be a black man, and to understand that you are inherently threatening. But the part that it gets really important is when you're dealing with especially law enforcement. I literally practiced, this is how you get pulled over, and you have to learn how do you get pulled over and how do you keep your hands on the wheel, and don't reach for your wallet or you'll get shot. Don't reach for in your glove compartment or you'll get shot. Don't reach for anything. Don't move too quickly. Don't fumble around. You really do have to be cognizant of what you're saying and how you're saying it, and really how you're being perceived, because your intention really doesn't matter. The perception is the reality, and you just have to be your best self at every single moment.
This is America. Don't catch you slipping now. Don't catch you slipping now.
A lot of students of color are reprimanded or disciplined in harsher ways.
I learned that the way that we treat our black students is alarmingly more extreme than the way that we treat our white students.
My freshman year of high school, I was arrested and Mirandized on campus for something that was completely untrue. They just called the police, and they called us into the office off the loudspeaker. We came in, and there were officers in the room. Immediately, we were being read our Miranda rights, and they were taking out the handcuffs, about to arrest us. And none of our parents were present. They weren't notified. This was my freshman year, so I was 14 to 15 years old. And it was definitely a traumatizing experience.
There's so much pressure on you. You just feel like, oh, okay, I have to do well because I'm the only person here, and I don't want people to come away from this classroom thinking that all of the people of my community are stupid.
This pressure builds up over time, affecting students' mental health. Students who experience things like microaggressions are more likely to suffer from depression, stress, and anxiety. Some kids are afraid to attend school, have trouble concentrating at school, or act out as a result of identity issues. For some, events like microaggressions feel like death by a million tiny cuts. Students are coming into classrooms loaded with microaggressions, moderating themselves, and finding that their race is a problem.
I think it's hard to talk about race. It's hard to, address it in a real way. So if you can sweep it under the rug and move on and not talk about it, it makes some people feel more comfortable, but it never actually solves the real problems that underlie race.
We need to hire teachers that come from different socioeconomic classes.
But we all bring the same tools, the same talents and gifts to the table, whether it's our personality, our smarts, our ambition, our passion for learning. We all carry the same things. The struggle is that sometimes those talents go unnoticed because of the perceived perceptions that society has of us as African Americans.
When you aren't exposed to another community, you can't empathize with another community.
Dr. King once said, "In the end, we will remember not the words of our enemies, but the silence of our friends." This speaks to me because I've had many instances where I've had white friends who didn't speak up for me if someone was being racist towards me or there was an act of racism being conducted around me. And I felt alone. I felt marginalized in the fact that my white friends didn't understand me and they didn't understand what was going on. And I felt that this film actually can help with that because it's important that we all understand each other. Without that, we can't create a community where people feel safe, and that's important.
This is America. Don't catch you slipping now. Don't catch you slipping now. Look what I'm whipping now. This is America. Don't catch you slipping now. Don't catch you slipping now. Look what I'm whipping now. This is America. Don't catch you slipping now.